Welcome everyone to our webinar. Today's topic is navigating the Secure Act. We're going to talk about retirement assets, withdrawals, distributions, beneficiaries, that sort of information. I'll hand it over to Chris Mallon and Andrew Randisi, certified financial planners here at Pennsylvania Capital Management. Andrew, you're up, I think.
Thank you, Leslie. Now let's get to it, folks. Navigating the Secure Act inherited IRAs. So let's first start on what actually is the Secure Act. Passed into law in December of 2019, pretty much in the dead of night. The Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement Act, Secure Act, made sweeping retirement changes for IRA owners. One of the main things that happened was it increased the age for required minimum distributions, or as we like to call it, your RMD, from age 70 and a half to 72. The required beginning date, so when you must first start taking that RMD, is still April 1st after the year after a client turns 72. However, still 2 RMDs must be taken. So not really much changed aside from just the date from 70 and a half to 72. Other things that still stayed the same was if you are an employee and currently still working at your job, you can still delay taking your required minimum distribution from your employer-sponsored retirement account after age 72. Also, no change for penalty-free withdrawals until age 59 and a half, or the age for qualified charitable distributions at age 70 and a half.
Can I ask a quick question on there, Andrew? On the second bullet point, that can you just elaborate on the part about 2 have to be taken that year? So the year you turn 72, you don't actually have to take one. You can wait till the next year.
Exactly. So what happened in the previous rules and now on these rules? What happened would be either your RMD has to be taken. At 72, you're allowed to delay it into the next year. You don't have to take it in the year that you turn 72. However, you have to take the following year, which you have turned 73. You still have to take the amount out that was required from the previous year for 72. However, you still have to do your age 73 RMD as well. That's the two RMDs in one tax year.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, that could come in handy. For an example, if a client is still working while they're age 72 and they have a high income job and pay a lot of taxes and they want to defer until the following year, you could delay taking and do the 2 RMDs when you're 73 and your income has stopped. So it'd be taxed in the lower tax bracket.
Right. Okay.
All right, spousal inherited IRAs under the Secure Act, and then we're going to go through, different beneficiary types and how the rules have changed surrounding those depending on the beneficiary. So option 1 for, a spouse inheriting IRA, spouse can roll the inherited IRA into their own name and treat it as if it was their own retirement account. Your RMDs would begin at age 72, penalty-free withdrawals at 59 and a half. This is a good option if you don't need the funds immediately and the surviving spouse is younger than deceased spouse. So for example, the older spouse passes away and say they were closer to 72, if you were to keep it in their name, their inherited IRA, it would be based off of when they would be 72. However, if you roll into your own, it's almost as if it never was, the deceased spouse's money. So it goes in your account and it's just looked at as it's all your own. Option 2, you can keep the retirement account as an inherited IRA, and then they don't begin until, like I just said, the deceased owner would have been 72. This is a good idea if, say, for example, the surviving spouse is older than the deceased spouse. And then the account can also be rolled into the surviving spouse's name before deceased would have turned 72. And then if spouse needs penalty-free withdrawals immediately or deceased spouse was younger, it's kind of the best options for that. If that makes sense. Any questions there?
So really the key point is the age difference between the surviving and deceased spouse, really.
Right, exactly.
Got it.
Out with the stretch, in with the 10-year rule. So what the Secure Act also instituted was a new classification of beneficiaries. You have your eligible designated beneficiaries, which can still use the old stretch rules, which would be based on the life expectancy table based on the beneficiary's birth date, and then it would slightly increase year after year from that. There's now a new classification called non-eligible designated beneficiaries. These have to use what's called the 10-year rule. So first I'll go back and to see how the eligible designated beneficiaries are classified now. Eligible designated beneficiaries include first spouses, minor children of the IRA owner, usually depending that is under the age of 21, disabled or chronically ill beneficiaries, or this is a bit of a tongue twister, beneficiaries who are less than 10 years younger than the owner. So for example, like a younger sister, or maybe a younger sibling or a younger cousin. You're still allowed to use the stretch IRA over the beneficiary's lifetime. Now, the non-eligible designated beneficiaries now include children, grandchildren who are not minors, nieces, nephews, cousins, pretty much everyone else except for an estate or a trust. This must follow now the 10-year rule, which is the account must be distributed within 10 years following the anniversary death of the account owner.
Yeah, so that's that's one of the most significant changes, right, Andrew? Is moving it is the 10-year rule is the newest addition to kind of pay for the fact that they're kicking the RMD out from 70.5 to 72. How do you pay for that delayed income stream? If you know you're the IRS, you have the 10-year rule.
Exactly.
All righty. So beware of the 5-year rule. There are some caveats with this. So there's the 5-year rule as well as the 10-year rule. 5-year rule is a non-designated beneficiary, refers to a beneficiary who is not a living person, such as an estate, charity, or certain trusts. So say an IRA owner dies before the beginning date, before they have to start taking their RMDs, and leaves an account to a non-designated beneficiary, triggers the 5-year rule. This means that the account must be liquidated by the end of the 5th year. So say, for example, the money is left just to the deceased estate, say it's left to a charity, or say it's left to a trust that is not specified as an IRA trust. It takes that 10-year window down to a 5-year window. So it's important to have your beneficiaries designated in your retirement accounts.
This is exactly why when we do talk to clients, it's always good to set those beneficiaries, because you don't want to leave it blank, because if you leave it blank, it automatically defaults to your estate, which then then trigger the 5-year rule, which you don't want to have happen, especially if you have beneficiaries that you'd like to pass the monies on down to.
Right. All right.
Planning strategies around the 10-year rule. Now, a couple things you can do. The first would be timing IRA withdrawals strategically. This is going to will be in the event of you have already inherited the funds and you're now the beneficiary. So you're within that 10-year window that you have to spend down the IRA. Couple things you can do here. You're not necessarily required to have to take out a 10th every year. You can strategically during that 10-year that window of time, if there's a higher income year for you, you can delay taking the distribution or take a very small amount, for example, and then let's say in the midst of that 10-year period, you are retired. Your income falls down. Your income pretty much no more ordinary wage income. You can then pick up and speed up and fill up your lower income tax buckets and take more of your inherited IRA to support yourself, especially if you're delaying, for example, Social Security to age 70. Chris,
I'll the next one. Tax efficient beneficiary designations. So that jumble of words, essentially meaning pick and choose your beneficiaries based off of their current situations, like their current tax situation. Say, for example, you have one child who is a high income earner, higher tax bracket, and you have another one who is in a lower tax bracket. Maybe one of your older children are nearing retirement. so they're going to be in a lower tax situation. It would make sense to leave an IRA to somebody in a lower tax bracket, because then they'll be paying less versus giving it to somebody who's in a higher tax bracket, because then they'll be paying more. So another idea would be to, okay, we'll leave the IRA assets to somebody in a lower tax bracket. And if we have Roth IRA assets, leave that to somebody who's in a higher bracket. So then they would not have to pay taxes on those. So instead of, kind of just looking at it quickly and be like, okay, everything's, 50-50 or, a third amongst your children or whomever you designate, it makes sense to kind of, take one step further, a little bit of a deeper dive, so you're not paying more in taxes than would be necessary.
Exactly. And another option to discuss from this would be the original account owner's perspective, following Chris up from the second planning strategy would be just spending down the IRA during your lifetime. If you have a large portion of, we'll call it, for example, you have $1 million in your taxable individual account or your revocable living trust, you have $1 million in your IRA rollover. If you wanted to prevent your kids from having the huge tax burden of inheriting an inherited IRA and having to take those those distributions over that 10-year rule, for example, you could bite the bullet, spend the account down for your lifestyle expenses, and leave the $1 million in the on the taxable side for the kids. They'll get the stepped up basis when an IRA would not get a step up in basis at this time.
Right. Next up, you could convert a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. So that is kind of similar to Andrew said before. You are biting the bullet. Instead of your beneficiaries paying the taxes, you would be paying the taxes. So convert it, traditional IRA, Roth IRA, pay the tax bill, and then once the IRA passes on, when the beneficiaries have to take the Roth monies out, they will not owe taxes since it already went in pre-tax.
Making qualified charitable distributions. So I know, getting back with the Secure Act, they did not change. So they changed RMDs from 70.5 to 72, but they did not change the eligibility for when you can start doing QCDs. This is still remained at 70.5. And what an IRA account owner is allowed to do, the original IRA account owner is allowed to do, is withdraw up to $100,000 per year, and those funds, essentially donate those funds to a 501c3 charity of their liking. And this also can satisfy your RMD as well. So you won't have to pay taxes on that required minimum distribution every year.
Mm-hmm. This is a popular option for clients of ours who maybe do not have children and want to, are charitably inclined to begin with. This is a common option that they choose on that front. Next up, leave the IRA to a charitable remainder trust. This avoids the 10-year rule entirely. So the IRA can either be liquidated and transferred to the charitable remainder trust at no tax cost, or income can be paid to another beneficiary for life or a fixed period, and then the balance goes to charity. We've talked about more in charitable remainder trusts in a previous webinar. So there's a lot more details in there. It's a little bit more complex, but it's definitely something to consider as well.
And then last but not least, the original account owner can purchase a life insurance policy. This would in effect be replacing the amount of the IRA that's lost to taxes for each of the beneficiary. The RMDs that the original account owner has to take every year is paying the insurance premium. But one note that you would want to maybe possibly structure properly is have the insurance policy in a separate life insurance trust or an ILIT. And that way the insurance policy would not be includable in your taxable estate.
Well said. I think one thing I'll add here just generally for all these different strategies is it's not any one solution is, perfect. It's usually a combination and kind of balancing them out together. Maybe it makes sense to, spend more of your IRA money versus your taxable money, convert a little bit to Roth, make sure the beneficiaries are designated properly. You can do some charitable contributions along the way if you're already doing those. save more in taxes, get some life insurance as well. If that's say if it's a really big tax bill down the line, that would be an option. And then you can do the charitable remainder trust as well. There's not one, silver bullet for something like this.
That makes a lot of sense, Chris. You can pick and choose several of these that apply to your situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I've heard, kind of rumblings around Congress and politics and stuff that they're talking about updating the Secure Act to a new version. And I think one of the things I heard is they may increase the age again. Is that true, or am I
Yes,
dreaming?
that is correct. Right now, both the House and the Senate, there's separate bills for Secure Act 2.0, as we like to call it. And while it could possibly be the RMDs may be increased from age 72 to age 75, that's still Congress is still working on that right now, and that that new bill we may see more daylight on that bill, and it may pass possibly later on at the tail end of the year. If it does, we will be sure to follow up with a Secure Act 2.0 presentation.
Great. Thank you very much. Look forward to more information from you guys if that does happen. I think we'll wrap up then. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on today's webinar. As always, feel free to reach out to any of us here at PCM. If you're a client or not a client, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to help. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
See you.